I'm Ava Sinclair, 17. And for as long as I can remember, I shared everything with my twin Zoe. We had the same laugh, the same stubborn streak, the same freckles across our noses. Everyone said we were inseparable, two halves of a whole. The day Zoe died, I lost more than my sister. I lost my anchor. It was the third week of July when our lives shifted. Mom, Karen, and Dad, Mark, insisted on our annual mountain hike. We packed identical neon windbreakers and matching water bottles. Zoe teased me for tripping over a stray root, and I playfully shoved her. She caught her balance just enough to save me, but not herself. She tumbled down the steep slope. 1 second she was there, the next, she was gone. Mom froze mid-scream. Dad stood at the trail's edge in shock. I clawed at loose dirt, scrambling toward Zoe's last spot. My heart pounded so loud that I swear I could hear it echo off the rocks. When I reached the clearing, all I found was her boot. I'd never been so alone. The funeral felt like a cruel play. Our Aunt Zoe's godmother whispered. She was so radiant. I stared at my own reflection in the polished casket lid, pale, shaking, empty. That night, Mom and Dad told me they'd bring Zoe back. They made promises I wasn't ready to hear. They moved me into Zoe's room 2 weeks later. One morning, I woke to find her pink running shoes lined up by the door. They were a half size too small. On the dresser sat her breakfast, a single boiled egg white, 6 blueberries, and black coffee. No cream, no sugar. I reached for my usual muffin, and Mom snapped. That's Zoe's now. Her voice was soft, almost gentle, but I felt a steel trap close around me. I learned, fast, that life as Zoe's replacement meant shrinking. In the bathroom, a digital scale blinked to life at dawn. I stepped on it and watched the numbers flash on Mom's phone. Text messages followed those 1100 calories. 1,800 goal. 1,600 spring target. Clothes in my closet vanished. In their place hung Zoe's extra small tops and denim shorts. Each had a white index card pinned to it. Day 1. Day 2. Goal 120 pounds. Dad would lean against the doorframe, whispering, "Your mother just wants to feel close to her daughter again." He never offered comfort. He only watched. At first, I complied. I downloaded Zoe's workout apps and tried to mimic her routines. My thighs burned as I squatted to Zoe's 30-day challenge drills. My stomach roared for real food. When I reached for a sandwich, Mom snatched it away and hissed, "Not you." She glared as if I'd betrayed her. Nights were the worst. My old bed had disappeared. In its place stood a cold metal elliptical. I stared at it, wondering if this was punishment or redemption. When hunger pangs woke me, only Cinder, the orange tabby Zoe hated, gave me solace. He'd curl on my chest, purring like an engine. I whispered to him, promising we'd escape together. Then came the empty collar. I found it on the kitchen counter with Zoe's name etched inside. Mom didn't look up from her calorie tracking app. Zoe was allergic, she said. We had to put her down. The words hit me like stones. I sank to the floor, tears blurring the room. Mom hovered over me and said, "Half portions for breakfast this week. You don't need energy to cry." I stared at my reflection in the fridge door. My cheekbones stood out. My eyes looked hollow. Something snapped inside me. I needed to know more about that day on the mountainside. In my backpack, hidden beneath textbooks, I carried a phone. It wasn't mine, it was Zoe's. I'd found it in Mom's car weeks ago, locked with a password. It had become my secret talisman. One rainy afternoon, I slipped into the attic. Dust motes danced in the slanted sunlight as I rooted through Zoe's old boxes. There, under stacks of camp photos, I uncovered a small key labeled voice memos. I dashed to my room and tested every date and quote we shared as kids' birthdays. Inside jokes. The mantra we repeated before tests. Finally, I hit the right one, my birthday backwards. The phone unlocked with a cheerful chime. As if Zoe herself had agreed, my pulse thundered as I tapped the app. Files filled the screen recordings from the last year. At first, they were mundane, Mom's orders on meals, Dad's grumbles about wasted effort. Then I found the night before the hike. Zoe's voice. Softer than I'd ever heard. I can't do this anymore. I don't want modeling. I want peace. Mom's answer was cold. Time to learn how fragile life can be. The truth obliterated everything I'd believed. I clutched the phone to my chest and realized Mom had planned more than a replacement. She'd created a trap. My legs shook as I dialed my counselor. Mrs. Dalton. She answered with a gentle, "Are you okay?" Ava, I whispered the recordings. Her gasp was loud enough to wake the house. "This is serious," she said. "We need help." My phone buzzed Mom's GPS tracker, pinging my location. 10 minutes to get home or be reported as a runaway. Anxiety tightened my throat as I slung on my backpack. I pocketed Zoe's phone and crept out the back door, following Cinder into the damp morning air. Behind me, the house stood like a gilded cage. As I crossed the dewy lawn, my mind raced. I had Zoe's voice. I had Mrs. Dalton on my side, and I had a plan. Escape wasn't enough. I would expose them. The first step was finding allies. The second was gathering proof. The third, watching their perfect facade shatter. Tomorrow, I would no longer just be Zoe's shadow. I would be Ava Sinclair. And I would fight back. That night I slipped into Mrs. Dalton's basement office, heart hammering so loud I thought the walls would shake. She'd left a window cracked just enough for me to squeeze through, Cinder trailing close behind. The basement smelled of old paper and lavender air freshener, a stark contrast to the sterile control of my home. Mrs. Dalton met me with a soft smile and a plate of cold pancakes, fuel for truth. She whispered, as I told her everything, from Zoe's disappearance to Mom's daily manipulations. She pressed record on her phone, her hands steady when mine trembled. By the time I left, I carried transcripts, voice files, and her unwavering promise to protect me, and my resolve burned brighter than ever. The next morning at school, I saw Zoe's empty locker for the first time. I'd always passed it without a second thought. Now it loomed like a wounded heart waiting for closure. I slipped inside a flash drive loaded with the recordings, wedged it between textbooks, and taped the locker ajar. Anyone curious would find the truth. My fingers itched. What if it fell into the wrong hands? But hiding wasn't an option anymore. The door clicked shut as I walked away, my chest tight with both dread and exhilaration. The truth was loose in the halls of Ravenwood High. After English class, I cornered Tyler Chen, Zoe's closest friend. His face drained when I showed him the flash drive. "You knew she was scared," he rasped. He admitted how Zoe had begged him to help lose weight, how she'd lied about her pills. He hadn't believed her at first. Why would he think his best friend was in danger? But now he believed. And the weight of his guilt made his shoulders slump. He agreed to sneak into the registrar's office that night, find our parents' signatures on those modeling contracts. We had to expose the forgeries that bound Zoe to their twisted agenda. That evening, I crept back home in pitch darkness, slipping in the back gate. Inside, the house was silent, except for the hum of Mom's lap Ido top in the kitchen. I froze when I saw her silhouette at the counter, tall, composed, deadly calm. She turned, and for a moment I saw something like disappointment flicker in her eyes before the mask snapped back into place, and she offered me a cup of herbal tea. "You look tired," she cooed. My lip curled as I remembered her words about fragile lives. The teapot hissed. I knew better than to drink. I swirled it on the counter and left it to cool while I stole a glance at the documents on her screen. Signatures. Dates that didn't line up, proof that Zoe had never agreed to this life. That night, Tyler and I met at Tessa's garage. Her parents traveled for work, and her security cameras were easy to loop. We darted inside, flashlights in hand, hearts slamming against ribs. The registrar's files sat in a locked cabinet, but Tyler had the keycard he'd lifted from the secretary's desk. As the drawer slid open, I saw row after row of dossiers, birth certificates, contracts, forged signatures. I took photos with Zoe's phone until my battery blinked red. My stomach churned. This evidence would break our family's facade, but it would also ruin us all. I forced myself to breathe. No turning back now. Back in my room, I laid out every piece of proof across the floor: voice recordings, forged contracts, weight charts, text transcripts. Cinder curled beside them, as if standing guard over my rebellion. I felt a surge of something I hadn't allowed myself in weeks: hope. If I released this evidence, our world would fracture forever, and maybe, just maybe, Zoe's memory would finally be free of Mom's lies. My phone buzzed a message from Mrs. Dalton: meet me at dawn by the old oak tree. I gripped the sheets of paper. Anticipation and terror knotted together in my gut. Tomorrow, the war would begin. That morning, I slipped through the dew-soaked grass to meet Mrs. Dalton by the old oak. Tyler hovered in the shadows, clutching Zoe's phone and the flash drive we'd stashed in her locker. The sky was pale lavender, the world still yawning awake. Mrs. Dalton's eyes shone with resolve as she downloaded every file, her fingers flying over her tablet. We watched the sunrise bleed through the leaves, our breaths misting in the cool air. When the last recording transferred, she pressed her hand to my shoulder and whispered, "This ends today." The promise stung my skin like acid. Today I would tear our family's secrets wide open. By mid-morning, the halls of Ravenwood High thrummed with hushed excitement. I'd slipped into every homeroom, activating locker alarms, so the doors creaked open with a metallic clang. Students spilled out in confusion, faces paling when they spotted the flash drive taped inside Zoe's locker. News spread faster than wildfire. Check your texts. I'd whispered to a few trusted friends. Videos, voice clips, and contract scans flooded social feeds. Phones buzzed and pinged with notifications, Zoe's voice echoing through corridors where laughter once reigned. The truth was seeping into every corner, and the walls of lies began to tremble. At home, Dad intercepted me in the foyer with frantic eyes. "What have you done?" he demanded, voice cracking like old plaster. His tie was loose, his usual composure stripped away. I laid the evidence on the console table: voice memos of Mom's hissed instructions, images of diet charts, the forged signatures. His face went from shock to horror as he swiped through the files. In the quiet that followed, I saw the man who had watched from the doorway finally awaken to what he'd enabled. He swallowed hard, lips trembling. I wanted to protect her. My heart twisted, pity and anger knotted together, but I couldn't let his guilt derail the moment. The family's collapse was imminent. Mom's text arrived seconds later. "Come home now, or I'm calling the police." I felt the familiar surge of panic, but I clipped it away like a broken branch. Tyler and Tess met me at the gate, eyes bright with adrenaline. Together, we marched into the house like rebels storming a fortress. In the living room, I flipped on Mrs. Dalton's tablet and played the recording of my mom admitting she'd drugged Zoe. Her face drained of color. And before she could spin a new lie, Tess's looped security footage showed Mom trailing me with her phone's GPS tracker. The room tightened around her as witnesses. Neighbors Tess had rallied stepped forward. Phones raised. Mom's mask cracked. And for the first time, I saw raw fear. That evening, I orchestrated the coup de grace. I invited every family member and a handful of school reporters into our sunroom under the guise of a family statement. Dad sat on one side, shell-shocked. Mom perched on the other, trembling but still primed to perform. I pressed live on my phone's camera and let the world watch. I spoke slowly, deliberately. "This is Ava Sinclair, not Zoe. My sister loved me enough to record her own story." I advanced my evidence across the coffee table: contracts, recordings, diet logs, each item landing with a thud that echoed through the silent room. As I finished, the chat exploded with comments. "We believe you. Justice for Zoe. You are so brave." My voice caught, but I held the line. The digital tide had turned, and with that final disclosure, our family's empire of lies crumbled into dust, setting the stage for a reckoning that would test every bond I had left. That night, as the living room emptied of neighbors and reporters drifted away, the silence felt heavier than any applause. Dad sat on the edge of the couch, head in hands, guilt etched into every line of his face. I stood in the center of the wreckage, heart pounding from the adrenaline and the expose. Sirens wailed down the street, drawing closer, and I felt the final piece of the truth click into place. When the police burst through the front door, Mom's face went ashen. She tried to plead. It's all a misunderstanding. But her voice wavered like a broken record. Handcuffs snapped around her wrists. And as she was led away, she locked eyes with me, half anger, half betrayal, and I saw the shattered remains of the mother I once loved. In the days that followed, our house became a rotating door of investigators, social workers, and forensic teams cataloging every scrap of evidence I'd collected. I watched them bag Zoe's supplements, photograph the elliptical I'd almost broken, and tag every pill bottle with a yellow sticker. Each act felt like reclaiming a piece of her stolen life. I sat across from Detective Ruiz and recounted the entire timeline: Zoe's accidental fall, the daily manipulations, the hidden voice memos, all with a flat clarity that surprised even me. When I handed over the last flash drive, he nodded solemnly. "You've done more than any victim could hope for," he said. And for the first time since Zoe's death, I believed there might be justice. Dad moved out into a small apartment nearby, his shame too heavy to live under one roof with me. He called every night, apologizing between choked sobs. "I was a coward," he admitted. "I loved her more than I loved you both. And I didn't see the damage." My own sorrow spiked at his confession. But I let it wash over me. Forgiveness would come later. Right now, I needed to focus on my own future. I packed my things back into my old bedroom, peeling off motivational post-its Mom had stuck on the walls. "Smile like Zoe. Never eat past 6 p.m. and toss them in the trash." With each rip, I felt more myself, flawed, hungry, alive. Word spread quickly about the upcoming court date. Local news outlets picked up the story, flashing my face on television as the twins' revenge. I wrestled with embarrassment and gratitude. Embarrassment at my private pain splashed across morning shows. Gratitude that Zoe's story would be heard. Mrs. Dalton offered to accompany me to every hearing, and I clung to her steadfast presence like a lifeline. Tyler volunteered as a witness, promising to testify about my mom's every deceit. Tess gathered letters from classmates who'd noticed Zoe's decline. Even Zara, my cousin who'd once laughed at Aunt Helen's cruel comments, sat in the gallery on the first day of trial, her eyes brimming with remorse and determination. The courtroom was cold and impersonal, a stark contrast to our warm, chaotic home. Mom sat at the defense table, her fingers entwined, head bowed. The prosecutor, a stern woman named Archer, laid out the charges: reckless endangerment, involuntary manslaughter, child abuse, and identity theft. I watched as the jurors scribbled notes, their faces impassive. When it was my turn, I rose and carried Zoe's phone into the witness stand, turning its screen toward the judge. My sister documented her own fear. I said, voice steady but thick with emotion. I played the final memo, her farewell to me, her declaration that she loved me enough to fight. The sound of Zoe's voice filled the room, and a single juror's hand flew to her mouth. The walls of denial crumbled in that moment. Outside the courthouse, the summer air felt surreal, sunlight and sirens mingling in the distance. Reporters clustered with microphones, but I pushed through them, searching for Sarah's familiar face. When I found her, she hugged me so tight it hurt. "You did it," she whispered, and I let the tears come. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to break. Every lie shattered, every secret unveiled, every moment of solitude validated. Yet amid the relief, I sensed the final act of this drama still awaited me. That evening, as I lay in bed clutching Zoe's old teddy bear, my phone buzzed with a message: verdict tomorrow. My breath hitched. Sleep eluded me as I replayed the trial's key moments: Mom's panicked testimony, Dad's withdrawn confession, the jurors' stony faces. I thought of Zoe, her smile frozen in photographs, her laughter trapped on voice memos. Tomorrow would decide if our story ended in justice or silence. My chest tightened with fear and hope. Each heartbeat a drum roll to the final scene. Tomorrow, I'd learn if telling the truth truly set us free. The morning sunlight sifted through the courthouse blinds like a promise I wasn't sure I deserved. My stomach twisted as I walked back into that familiar hall. The air thick with whispered speculations and the shuffle of feet. Sarah sat beside me, her hand warm and steady against mine. But my pulse still thundered in my ears. The empty seat where Mom had sat just days ago loomed like a hollow accusation. I swallowed and reminded myself that I wasn't alone, that Zoe's voice. Mrs. Dalton's steadfast faith and Tyler's quiet courage had led me here. As I settled into the witness gallery, the judge's gavel fell with a crack that sounded like a verdict before words were spoken, and suddenly, every heartbeat became a countdown. When the clerk's voice trembled through the silence, "We find the defendant guilty," I felt the world shift on its axis. Dad, seated at the back, covered his mouth with a shaking hand. Even the jurors seemed to exhale relief like a collective confession. Mom's lips quivered as the words punched through the courtroom, "Air guilty of involuntary manslaughter, child abuse, and identity fraud." The gravity of it sank into my bones. And for the first time since Zoe's fall, I allowed myself to weep, not from sorrow, but from vindication. The tears blurred the stained glass window and the rows of observers, but every drop tasted like hard-won justice. As Mom was led away in cuffs once more, I realized that the nightmare was finally yielding to dawn. Outside, the world felt both brighter and unbearably heavy. Reporters swarmed us with questions, but I only had eyes for Dad as he approached with a tentative hesitance I'd never seen before. He offered no excuses this time, only a trembling apology that felt too small for the wounds he'd helped conceal. "I'm so sorry, Ava," he whispered, voice raw. I searched his face for the father I lost when he looked away, and for a moment I saw a man broken under the weight of his own cowardice. I nodded, not because forgiveness came easily, but because holding on to rage felt like letting Mom win again. With each step toward the car, I felt the first stirrings of something I thought I'd never reclaim: compassion. That afternoon, the courthouse steps emptied, and the neighborhood fell silent as if holding its breath. I walked home beneath a sky smeared with bruised clouds, the house looming with memories and empty echoes. Inside, dust motes danced through fractured rays of light that once felt menacing. I made my way to Zoe's room now, mine, and knelt beside the elliptical, tracing my fingertips over its cold handlebars. It had been the instrument of my undoing and my deliverance. I cleared away the old meal plans stenciled on index cards, crumpling them into a ball. As each sheet fell, I felt a piece of Zoe's story slip back into the world where it belonged. I cradled her teddy bear against my chest and vowed to fill the silence with something better than revenge. By evening, I stood before the old oak tree where Mrs. Dalton first helped me unlock Zoe's voice. The bark was rough under my palm, a reminder that healing is never smooth but always real. Tyler, Tess, and Sarah gathered around as I placed a single white lily at its base, Zoe's favorite flower. Untainted by pressures I'd never let her face alone again. We stood in quiet solidarity, our breaths mingling with the hush of twilight. "She's free now," I whispered, as much to myself as to my friends. The wind rustled through the leaves, carrying away the last echoes of lies. Tomorrow, I would start a new chapter, not just for me, but for every girl who ever felt invisible under someone else's expectations, and this time, I would write it in my own voice. That night, I lay in Zoe's room, the moonlight painting silver patterns on the walls where Mom's post-its once clung. I traced the stitches on her old teddy bear, thinking of how long it took me to speak my truth and how heavy silence can be. My phone buzzed with messages from people I barely knew, classmates, strangers who'd watched the trial live stream, even modeling agencies offering support groups. The world felt larger and scarier all at once. But for the first time, it felt possible to breathe without choking on secrets. Tomorrow, I would step into a life I couldn't yet see, but I knew it would be mine forever. The next morning, I met Mrs. Dalton at the courthouse steps. Not for a hearing, but for a new beginning. She handed me a stack of blank journals. each labeled with prompts, "My story," "My sister's voice," "My future." I opened the first page and let my pen dance over the lines, filling the silence with memories of laughter, whispered fears, and Zoe's brave defiance. Every word was a brick, rebuilding the foundation Mom had tried to tear down. By the time the sun crouched low in the sky, I'd written enough to feel the weight lift from my chest, and I knew that stories, once told, can never be erased. In the weeks that followed, I organized a memorial art show at Ravenwood Community Center. Friends painted Zoe's favorite scenes, sunsets over the lake, wildflowers bursting from rocky soil, and local teens wrote letters to their own hidden scars. The exhibit brimmed with raw emotion, laughter and tears mingling under string lights. When the doors closed that night, I stood in the empty hall and whispered, "She lives here." Every painting, every note, was a heartbeat echoing in the space where Zoe's truth could finally reside. Dad called me one evening with news he'd begun testifying for a child advocacy organization, using his own failure as fuel to protect other families. He asked if I'd speak at their next conference. My voice still trembled at the thought of a microphone. But I agreed. On stage, I wasn't just a victim or a twin. I was a sister who refused to let her story end in tragedy. When my talk ended, the room rose in a standing ovation, and I realized that courage is contagious, and that sharing pain can light the path for others to follow. Autumn arrived with its crisp air and burnt gold leaves, and I sat by the old oak tree where we'd first plotted Zoe's rescue. I laid out the journals, now filled with my words, and watched as wind lifted the pages in a gentle dance. I pressed a final lily into the roots and whispered, "You are seen." In that moment, I understood that healing isn't a destination but a journey, one that bends toward hope as long as we keep walking. On the first day of senior year, I walked into Ravenwood High with my own locker, no longer Zoe's shadow but Ava Sinclair, survivor and storyteller. I hung a small plaque inside, this space dedicated to truth. When classmates asked what it meant, I told them, we all have stories that need telling. Their faces brightened with curiosity and relief, and I knew that by opening my life, I'd cracked open theirs. At night, I dream of Zoe, her laugh like wind chimes, her hand brushing mine. I wake with tears and a smile, knowing she's free from fear and that her final gift was teaching me how to fight. As I slide back beneath the covers, I whisper into the darkness, "Rest easy. Sis, I've got this." And for the first time since she fell, I feel at peace knowing I'm living not just for both of us, but for every silent voice longing to be heard. Story 2. My wife demanded that I leave the house in her side article. I gave them a chance. I then got my keys back and closed our joint accounts. Her lawyer arrived 2 days later with the intention of negotiating. Hello. Go through it. About 6 months have passed since this incident, and I'm still reeling from the complete craziness of it all. While I was out of town on business, my wife let her secret lover into my home. He pretended to be the owner. He then went through my business files, which I discovered. I therefore had him imprisoned, took her for everything, and filed for divorce at the appropriate time. She returned weeping and broken. This is what transpired. I am a 32-year-old man who has operated my own HVAC contracting company for the past 8 years. Began with nothing. My dad bounced when I was 12. So I grew up with my mom in Section 8 housing. Worked weekends at a scrapyard during high school. I went to trade school and used a toolbox and a dilapidated van to start this business. I now make a good 6 figures working in manufacturing plants, hospitals, office buildings, and commercial installations, the kind of work that requires me to travel for weeks at a time but pays well enough to live the life I've always desired. Around Elf P.M. Last month, I rolled back from a job in Ohio. Been gone 9 days straight. Installing climate control systems in a new medical facility. Living off truck stop food. Sleeping in cheap motels. Dealing with inspectors and project managers who think HVAC work is magic. Work boots were covered in insulation. My shoulders were screaming. And I hadn't eaten anything non-plastic since breakfast. Before the next job, all I wanted to do was get something cold out of the refrigerator, turn on the Xbox, and unwind for a few hours. Someone may begin destroying my front door with their fists 2 minutes into my drink, not knocking and pounding as if they were attempting to break it down. I assumed that Delgado, who lives next door, was experiencing yet another problem with his water heater. Delgado, a 62-year-old former Army Ranger, has taken on the role of neighborhood security. He has more surveillance gear than a field office of the FBI, and handles every small issue as though it were a strategic one. Usually, it's a straightforward issue that I can resolve in 20 minutes. Expecting to see Delgado frowning and holding a wrench, open the door. I've never seen this guy before, and he's standing on my porch as if he owns it. In the early 30s, making an excessive effort to appear successful. An eye-catching haircut from a designer tracksuit. He's holding a manila folder as if it contained nuclear codes. And I have a podcast. Without even making an effort to introduce himself, he says, "You must be the husband." Simply standing there, exuding confidence and a fake ass. "My name is Danny. Bevensday. Ruth wants you gone." This random guy is attempting to evict me from my own home, while I'm standing there exhausted and dressed for work. I briefly believed that I might have heat stroke or another illness. What on earth he's waving this folder? I said, "Man, Ruth filed for divorce. In order for us to proceed with everything, you must leave by Wednesday." I studied the documents. It bore Ruth's signature. Indeed. We did. Yeah. Bro. Ruth and I are together now. She has been unhappy for months or so. You know it's time to move on. Then something clicked. This was no mediator or legal process server. Standing on my porch, Ruth's new boyfriend was attempting to evict me from my own property as if I were a non-paying tenant. I turned the deadbolt through the security peephole and shut the door in his face without saying a word. For about 30 seconds, I watched him stand there, presumably attempting to determine whether his power move had been successful. He then made his way back to his rented Audi. His budget was undoubtedly being stretched by that. Delgado remained on his porch the entire time, watching and smoking a cigarette as if it were prime time. As Danny climbed into his car, he yelled, "Nice try, champion." Danny didn't answer. Like a teenager who has just been turned down at prom, they just walked out of the driveway. After returning inside, I called 3 times. First to my lawyer to explain the circumstances and request that he review my legal position. Second, to my bank, where I set up alerts on every account until I figured out Ruth's strategy. Ruth's and my joint accounts were also frozen. She most likely had a personal stash or was using Danny's credit or money. In any case, the minute I financially locked her out, the clock began to tick. Third, alerting my business partner Brian that work may be disrupted for a few days due to personal drama. I co-founded the business with Brian following trade school. I concentrate on commercials, and he manages the residential side. Good guy. No bullshit. And ruthless when it comes to safeguarding our company. "Would you like me to investigate this Danny character?" Brian inquired. "One of the guys I know does background checks." "Not yet," I said. "But keep that option open." That night I barely slept. Not because I was worried about losing the house. I knew exactly where I stood legally. But because I was starting to realize how long this had probably been brewing behind my back. The next morning, I started noticing things I'd been too busy to catch before, little details that suddenly made sense in a very different context. Wednesday morning, I changed every lock in the house. Cost me $350 for 6 new deadbolts, plus a smart lock system with camera integration. Best investment I ever made. Here's what Danny and Ruth didn't know, and what she'd apparently forgotten to mention during their little planning session. I bought this house 3 years before we got married. 2600方夸拽. Finished basement. 2-car garage. Paid cash. Using money I'd saved from my first few big commercial contracts. Plus inheritance from my grandfather, who taught me never to trust anyone with my assets. The deed has one name on it. Mine. I never added Ruth because my grandfather used to say, "Never give someone the power to destroy what you built alone." Old man was paranoid about everything. But that paranoia just saved my life. Once the locks were changed, I started thinking about weird stuff that had been happening for weeks. Things I'd chalked up to Ruth being Ruth, but now seemed way more suspicious. Groceries vanishing twice as fast as usual. Electric bills spiking even when I wasn't home. Streaming services showing content I'd never watched. Extra dishes in the dishwasher. The expensive coffee I bought for special occasions. Always being empty. I'd been noticing this stuff for over a month, but didn't connect the dots. When you're working 70-hour weeks and traveling constantly, you don't have time to analyze household patterns. Then I remembered Danny's exact words. We can start the transition process. He'd been part of the situation for a while already. That's when I went detective mode, started with social media. Ruth's Instagram was mostly the same performative stuff. Yoga poses. Expensive brunch photos. Motivational quotes about leveling up and cutting toxic people. But there were new faces in her stories now. Group shots at restaurants I'd never been to. People I didn't recognize. And a lot more activity during times when I was supposedly the only one home. Then I found Danny's TikTok account. Holy hell. This clown had been running a full content creation operation out of my house for over a month. Not just casual videos. Professional setups with ring lights and multiple camera angles. Him cooking elaborate meals in my kitchen with my appliances. Working out in my basement gym with my equipment. Sitting in my home office using my custom-built desk as a backdrop for entrepreneur mindset content. One video showed him making some elaborate coffee drink with my $300 espresso machine. Talking about morning routines that separate winners from losers. Another was him grilling premium steaks on my back deck. Explaining how to live like you've already made it. The comments were full of people asking how he afforded such a nice lifestyle. He never corrected them. Just let everyone assume it was all his. The worst one was filmed in my office. He's sitting in my ergonomic chair. Feet up on my desk. Talking about the millionaire mindset. While my business certifications and awards hung on the wall behind him, you don't fake it till you make it. He said in that video, you build it piece by piece until it becomes your reality. Yeah. I built it with actual pieces. Ductwork and compressors and 12-hour days and crawl spaces that would make this guy cry. I started screenshotting everything. Every video. Every comment. Every caption. The timestamps showed he'd been doing this for at least 6 weeks. Always when I was out of town on jobs. Then I checked my gym membership. 24-hour fitness lets you add family members. So I added Ruth when we got married. Turns out she'd added Danny as my cousin about 2 months ago. The account history showed he'd been going regularly. Bringing different people as guests. Racking up charges for personal training sessions and premium services. The staff notes showed he'd been telling people he was a successful entrepreneur and hosting business networking sessions in the juice bar. I called the gym and canceled his access immediately. Then I changed all the passwords on every streaming service. Then I started digging through credit card statements to see what other surprises were waiting. That evening, Danny came back for round 2. I was eating dinner when my phone buzzed with a motion alert. Pulled up the security feed. And there he was, pacing around my front porch like a caged animal. He started hammering on the door again. Why'd you change the locks? He shouted through the wood. Ruth's not picking up. This is her house. 2. I walked over but didn't open the door. It's not, I said. Clearly, we have rights. You can't just lock people out of their own home. You don't even have a key. Danny, I've been staying here for weeks. That gives me rights. You've been trespassing. There's a legal difference. That triggered a full meltdown. He started pacing the porch like a wild animal, screaming about tenant rights and unlawful eviction, and how he was going to sue me for everything. At one point, he actually tried to kick in the door. That's when Delgado stepped out from his house next door. Hey. TikTok. He called out a cigarette hanging from his lip. Yeah. You with the fake-ass teeth, half the block's watching you lose your shit right now. Danny spun around and tried to look tough. Stay out of this. Old man. This ain't your business. Delgado didn't even blink. Kid. I've put holes in people for way less than what you're pulling right now. You might want to think real hard about what you do next. They stared at each other for about 15 seconds. Danny looked back at my locked door, then at Delgado, then back at the door. Finally, he stomped off to his car like a kid who had just been told he couldn't have candy. I saved all the security footage to cloud storage. Thursday morning. I sent Ruth a text. You have 24 hours to collect your belongings. Danny is permanently banned from this property. Her response came back so fast. She must have been sitting there waiting for it. Absolutely not. Danny lives here now. You can't just kick us out like that. We have rights. This is our home and our life together. Check the deed. I replied. That opened the floodgates. I got a wall of texts about how I was being financially abusive and emotionally manipulative and trying to control everything. She started throwing around legal terms like she'd been binge-watching Law and Order all night. I didn't respond to any of it. Just let her waste her energy. Around noon, she switched tactics. Now it was all about how I owed her for 6 years of being your unpaid wife. She claimed she'd given up everything for my business and deserved what I'm worth for her sacrifice. The reality, she worked part-time folding yoga pants, spent her whole paycheck on wellness shit, and had never once helped with a single bill. But now she was playing the martyr. Then came the guilt trip. How can you do this to Muffin? She's been my baby for 3 years. You're literally abusing an innocent animal. Muffin was a cat she'd impulse bought and ignored for months. I'd been the one buying food, cleaning the litter box and taking it to the vet. By Thursday evening, she'd moved to guilt trips. Long, rambling messages about how we used to be soulmates and how I was destroying something sacred. And couldn't we work this out like evolved adults? I started documenting everything. Bank statements, mortgage papers, assurance documents, utility bills, every piece of evidence that proved I owned the house and had been paying for everything myself. Then I organized all the evidence I'd collected on Danny. The TikTok videos, the gym membership fraud, the screenshots of him pretending to own my property, put it all in a folder with dates, timestamps and legal annotations. Friday morning at 8:30 a.m. Sharp. Someone knocked on my door. Looked through the peephole and saw a guy in a discount suit holding a briefcase that looked like it came from a thrift store. Mr. Johnson, he said. When I opened the door, I'm attorney David Garcia. I represent Mr. Danny. We got to talk about you illegally kicking out my client. I let him in. Not because I was worried, but because I wanted to see what kind of BB's legal strategy they thought they had. Garcia sat down at my kitchen table and pulled out a yellow legal pad covered in chicken scratch. He started throwing around terms like established residency and de facto tenancy and wrongful lockout damages. Your client doesn't have a lease. I said, doesn't matter. He's been living here for over 60 days. That makes him a tenant under state law. Lease or no lease for free. No rent. No utilities. No paperwork. Financial contribution isn't required for residential rights. I pulled out my phone and played one of Danny's videos. Danny's voice filled the kitchen. Ruth's with me now. This is our place. We live here together. Garcia stopped writing. I played another one. I'm her man now. We're partners in this. You can't just kick us out. Then I slid the evidence folder across the table. Property deed insurance documents. Bank statements. Utility bills. Security footage of Danny trying to break down my door. Everything organized and ready to go. Garcia went through it slowly. I watched his cocky expression turn to shit as he realized how screwed his client was. Look, my client would be willing to drop any future claims if you just gave him a small relocation fee. He said finally, just her personal belongings and whatever was left of her dignity. The whole process took 6 weeks. My lawyer called it the most efficient divorce he'd ever handled. When you file at the right time with the right evidence. He said it's not even a fight. It's just documentation. Ruth went full victim mode on social media after the divorce was finalized. Long posts about financial abuse and how I'd weaponized the legal system to destroy her happiness. Nobody was buying it. Her own family reached out to apologize. Her father called me directly. I didn't raise her to be this kind of person. I'm ashamed of what she's become. Her mother was even more direct. You're better off without her. We tried to warn her years ago. Her sister Jennifer contacted me through Facebook. She's completely lost it, blaming everyone except herself. Even our parents have cut her off. The boutique where she worked fired her entirely. Couldn't have someone associated with federal crimes representing their brand. She ended up in a studio apartment across town, working at a chain restaurant, trying to rebuild her life from scratch. Last I heard, she was attempting to become a life coach, selling online courses about overcoming adversity and rebuilding after betrayal. Zero customers. Zero credibility. Delgado kept tabs on both of them for months. Know your enemies, he told me. That's basic tactical thinking. About 6 months after the whole mess started, 3 months post-divorce, Ruth showed up at my door. It was a Tuesday evening. I just gotten back from a major contract in Florida. EBay Boscher. Zero job installing climate control for a new pharmaceutical facility. Business was booming. Reputation was solid. Life was exactly where I wanted it. I opened the door and barely recognized her. She'd lost weight. Her hair was a mess. And she was wearing clothes that looked like they came from a thrift store. Can we talk? She asked. Barely above a whisper. We're divorced. Ruth. There's nothing to talk about. About us, about maybe trying again. She started crying. I screwed up. She said. Danny was just using me. He made me think you were the bad guy. I was so stupid. And I'm sorry. But we can fix this. I still love you. We can get married again. I stared at her. The delusion was a whole different level. I'm drowning. She whispered. I can't pay rent. I got nothing left. And Danny, he's in prison. Won't even talk to me. His lawyer said he blames me for everything. So now you want to come back. I want to make it right. I want to be the wife you deserved. I'll do anything. Delgado was peeking from his window, listening to every word. Here's what's going to happen, I said, turning back to her. You're going to leave. You're going to stay away from me. My house. My business. My life. Forever. Please. She begged. I'll sign whatever you want. I'll give up everything. Ruth. We're already divorced. You already gave up everything that happened months ago. I can't make it on my own. I need help. I need you. That's when I smiled. You should have thought about that before you moved another man into my house. She was full on sobbing now. I'll do anything. I'll be your maid. Your whatever. Just please don't leave me like this. I started closing the door. Your time's up. Step back, please. I'm disparity. I have nowhere else to go. That's not my problem anymore. That's why I divorced your ass. Then she started screaming. All 7 stages of grief happening within 2 minutes. Screw you. You destroyed my life. Everything is because of you. Nothing would have happened if you cared about me. Are you done? She didn't like that. Started muttering curses. Sobbing and snorting all at the same time. I watched her sit in her beat-up car for 10 minutes. Crying. Then she drove away. And that was the last time I saw her. Delgado walked over from his porch about an hour later. Heard the whole thing. He said, You handled that like a professional, yep. Want a drink? Oh. Absolutely. 6 months later, I got a message from Jennifer. Ruth. Sister Ruth had moved back in with her parents in Ohio. Working at a grocery store. Living in their basement. Still trying to launch her life coaching business with zero success. Danny got out of prison last month. Moved back in with his parents in another state. Working at a call center banned from social media. Reputation destroyed forever. Meanwhile, my business is thriving. I started dating a woman who actually appreciates what I've built instead of trying to steal it. But we're still taking things slow. Delgado is still the best early warning system a man could ask for. And every time I walk through my house, I remember exactly what happens to people who mistake kindness for weakness. Some lessons are permanent. Some consequences are forever. That's exactly how it should be. Story 3. My name is Adam. I'm 28. And until just a month ago, I was living less by choice than by necessity in my parents' guest room. If I'd had any other option, believe me, I would have taken it. But life doesn't always cooperate with our plans. Fresh out of college with a computer science degree, I landed what I thought was a promising job at a mid-sized tech company. Then the pandemic hit. The company underwent massive layoffs. and I was among the first to go. Over the next 18 months, I sent out hundreds of resumes, sat through dozens of interviews, and never once got a firm offer. My savings dwindled to nothing, and the only door left open to me was the one at home. I assured myself it would be temporary. My parents clearly disagreed. At first, things weren't unbearable. My father, Mark, is a quiet, keep it to yourself kind of man. But my mother, Diane, turned into a full-time hall monitor. Every time I ate a meal or flipped off a light, she'd bark. This isn't a hotel loud enough for the neighbors to hear if I left a single cup in the sink. I told myself she was just stressed. That excuse wore thin when pretty barbed remarks gave way to direct comparisons. Your cousin Rachel just bought her own house and she's 2 years younger than you, she'd say in that sing-song voice, wiping a spotless counter for the 5th time that morning. It's really sad that you're still here at your age. Your father and I were raising you by the time we were 28. My parents might have thought they were motivating me, but all they succeeded in doing was reminding me how far I'd fallen. I tried to help. I offered to cook, clean, mow the lawn, fix the router when it acted up. I freelance where I could build websites for local businesses, help the family, friends, set up an online store. I wasn't just lying on the couch binging television. But in her eyes, it didn't matter. I was still the leech. It didn't help that my younger brother Jordan was their golden child. He's 24, works in finance, lives in a high-rise downtown, and makes sure everyone knows it. He rarely visits, unless there's a holiday or mom begs him to come over for dinner. But when he walks in, it's like Moses parting the Red Sea. Suddenly, my mom's whole mood lifts. Her voice gets sweet and cheerful. There's my baby. You look so fit. Are you working out meanwhile? I'm in the corner holding a trash bag full of recycling, trying not to be noticed. One evening, Jordan came by for dinner and I could feel it brewing. I was setting the table, placing mismatched plates down with the usual carelessness I've grown accustomed to. Since they always treat me like I don't belong anyway, Jordan barely acknowledged me. He made some comment about gas prices and how some people are lucky they don't have to commute. I didn't take the bait. But then Mom poured him a drink and laughed a little too loudly at something he said. She turned to me and asked, "Have you even tried applying for real jobs lately?" My chest tightened. I'd already told her about the 2 interviews I had that week. But she didn't care. Jordan chimed in. You know, at some point it stops being bad luck and starts being bad choices. He wasn't even looking at me when he said it. That was the night things snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just picked up my plate, walked back to the kitchen and ate, standing up at the counter like I was 12 years old again. I could hear them laughing in the dining room. The words blurred, but I caught snippets. Can't coddle forever. Needs to grow up. Embarrassing at this point. The next day I was sitting in the den, laptop open, trying to finish a freelance job redesigning a local bakery's website. When Mom walked in, she didn't knock. She never knocks. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. And I knew something was coming. You need to start paying rent, she said flatly. I nodded. I'd heard this before. I already said I'd help out once I finished this site. They're paying. I'm not talking about maybe someday. I'm talking now. Today. I stared at her, confused. You want me to write you a check with money I don't have? No. Adam, I want you to grow up. This has gone on long enough. We've done more than our share. You're just a leech living off us. The words slapped me harder than I expected. Leech. She said it with this look of disgust, like I was something stuck to the bottom of her shoe before I could even reply. She turned and started dragging a duffel bag from the closet. I'd barely had time to react when she stormed back into the room, threw the bag at my feet and said, "Go leech somewhere else." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I zipped the bag up, packed my laptop, charger and toothbrush, and left. Not a single word. Just the echo of that word. Leech chasing me down the driveway. I couch surfed for a bit. First with my friend Lucas. Then stayed a few days with my ex. who was kind enough to let me crash while I figured things out. But that time on my own, scary as it was, pushed me to go all in. I took on more freelance jobs, even helped a local artist build an e-commerce site to sell her prints. One night, out of nowhere, I got a LinkedIn message from a recruiter who had seen my freelance portfolio. Within a week, I was interviewing for a remote position with a tech startup. And I got the job. It paid decently. Not Silicon Valley money, but enough to start reclaiming my life. The best part, it came with full benefits and the option to work from anywhere. So I did something that surprised even me. I used the money I'd been saving from freelancing and got a studio apartment. Tiny. But mine. No one could throw me out of it. No one could call me a burden. About 3 weeks after I moved in, I was finishing up a project when I noticed a call from my dad. I hadn't heard from him since I left. Not even a "how are you?" I let it go to voicemail. Then another call came in. Then a text. "Why did the bank freeze our account?" He blinked. What then? I remembered something. Something I hadn't thought about in weeks. Back when I was jobless, Dad had asked me to help him switch over their joint banking setup. He was tired of driving to the bank. And since I was good with tech stuff, he asked me to set up their online access, their mobile banking, and crucially, link their account with their tax software. I'd walked him through every step. We added my email and number as recovery contacts. I was even a secondary administrator on their joint account. Not to spend anything, but to troubleshoot if anything went wrong. And now that access was still there, I didn't reply right away. I sat there just staring at the message. I imagined them sitting at the dining room table. My mom pacing. My dad fumbling with the bank app. Maybe even calling the helpline. Only to be told there was a verification lockout, and they'd need secondary contact access to regain control. That's when I typed out a reply as the leech. No emojis. No explanation. Just those 3 words. And less than an hour later, everything exploded. I barely had time to make lunch before my phone started buzzing again. This time it was my mom. 3 missed calls in under 5 minutes. Then the text started. Mom texted Adam. "This isn't funny. Call your father back. We can't pay the credit card bill. Are you really doing this to us? After everything we've done for you, fix this now." I didn't answer for the first time in years. I had leverage. And I wasn't going to waste it. I wasn't interested in revenge for the sake of being cruel. But I wanted accountability. I wanted them to see the version of me they never bothered to acknowledge. Not the lazy burden they imagined, but the person who held their household together quietly in the background, paying their bills online, updating their antivirus software, reminding them to file taxes on time, troubleshooting their Wi-Fi, even flagging fraudulent charges on their card once before they noticed. But to them, I was just some ungrateful freeloader. That evening, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered it on instinct. Adam. It was my dad trying to sound calm. But I could hear the strain in his voice. "Look, we need to access our bank account. It's locked. And they said you are listed as the secondary admin. I don't know what you did, but I didn't do anything." I said evenly. "The security system locked it automatically after multiple failed logins." "Okay. Fine. That's fine. Just help us unlock it." There was a pause. I didn't respond. He hesitated. "Please." The word landed awkwardly, like a foreign language he hadn't spoken in years. "Sure," I said. "But I'd like to talk about something first." Silence. Like while your wife screamed at me in front of Jordan. Called me a leech and threw my stuff out. Another pause. "Adam, let's not know. We are going to. You want me to clean up your mess again, then you're going to listen. Not talk. Not excuse. Just listen." There was a quiet sigh on the other end. But he didn't hang up. I didn't ask to move back. I didn't want to be in that house again. But I did everything I could to help. I cooked. I cleaned. I fixed things. I made money. Not much, but enough to pay for my own food and give you gas money when the car broke down. And for all that, I got treated like a stray dog at your dinner table. "Adam, I'm not done. My voice cracked a little. I felt the years of frustration pushing up from my throat, everything I'd swallowed back every time they dismissed me. She called me a leech. She kicked me out like trash. And you just stood there. You let her. He didn't respond. She humiliated me in front of Jordan like I was sympathetic. Loser. But the truth is, your bank account that's been running smoothly. Because I've been the one keeping it that way. You didn't even know how to reset your password without me. Okay. Okay. He muttered. You've made your point. No, I haven't. I stood up from my chair and started pacing my small apartment. You two acted like I was some failure who needed to be kicked while I was already down. And now you need me. Another long pause. Yes. He finally admitted. We do. The simplicity of those 3 words hit me harder than I expected. Not in a good way. More like a sudden gust of wind that knocks the breath out of you. Because I realized right then they didn't care why I was struggling. They only noticed me when I was useful. Still, I wasn't cruel. I wouldn't let bills go unpaid out of spite. But I also wasn't going to let this slide like I always did. I offered terms. I'd unlock the account. But first, I wanted an apology from both of them. A real one in person. And no, not just a mumbled sorry. While Dad fidgeted and Mom pretended like none of it had happened. I wanted acknowledgement, and I wanted space. No request for favors for at least 6 months. No guilt trips. No surprise visits. And I'd be removing myself as an admin on every one of their financial tools forever. You can manage your own banking from now on. I said. Or get Jordan to help my dad's side again. She's not going to like this. I didn't like getting thrown out of the house I grew up in. There was a short silence. I'll talk to her. The call ended. I felt my hands trembling. Part anger. Part adrenaline. Part sadness. I'd never spoken to my dad like that before. Not once. But I didn't feel bad. Not this time. 2 days passed before I heard back. This time it was an email from my mom. Short. Awkwardly formal. It started with a realize I said things I shouldn't have and ended with, we hope you're doing well. No signature. No love. Mom. But I got what I asked for. I unlocked the account and removed myself from it immediately after. Then I blocked their number for a week. Not to punish them. Just to breathe. To think. And then the real fallout started. Because the thing is, when you remove the person doing all the invisible labor, when the leech walks away, suddenly everyone sees just how much they relied on them. I found out what happened next. Not through a phone call. Not through a knock at my door. But through my cousin Lily's Instagram story. She had taken a quick boomerang video during Sunday brunch at Grandma's house. Mom sitting stiffly at the far end of the table, wine glass untouched. Lips pursed like she'd bitten into a lemon. My dad was beside her, rubbing his temples, looking like a man who had just learned how to use the internet and failed. Meanwhile, Jordan sat across from them, his smug grin replaced by a furrowed brow. That was new. The caption, when the group project loses, the only person who knew how to do anything, #family drama. I DM'd her with a simple what happened. Her reply came fast, LMAO. Your mom's been trying to figure out how to log into her online banking for a week. She locked the account again this morning. Jordan came over to fix it and somehow made it worse. Now she's saying you sabotaged it on purpose. I stared at the screen, genuinely stunned at how fast the blame had boomeranged back to me. But I couldn't even feel angry. Just tired. The kind of tired that runs deeper than sleep. Because there it was again. No matter how much I helped. No matter how quietly I worked behind the scenes. The moment things went wrong, I was the villain in their story. It didn't stop there. Apparently. After I removed myself from their tax filing access, my dad realized he hadn't saved the login credentials for the new system I set up for them last year when he called customer support. They asked him to verify his last filed return, which of course I had submitted for him through my email with a password saved in a private Google Drive. He no longer had access to. That alone might have been recoverable, if not for the fact that Jordan, in his infinite wisdom, decided to start fresh and tried to create a new account using my dad's social security number. The system flagged it as potential identity theft and locked everything. Tax software, online statements, even his HRS portal. They couldn't access a dime. Lily told me this with the glee of someone watching a soap opera play out in real life. Your mom told Grandma that she thinks you hacked them out of revenge. Laughing emoji. I just texted back. I warned them, and I warned them clearly. Firmly with boundaries. Not threats. Not games. Boundaries, and they treated it like I was bluffing. A week later, I got a knock on the door of my apartment. I knew it was them before I even looked through the people. My building had a specific kind of echo when someone stood in the hall. Slow. Heavy footsteps with no urgency. I opened the door slowly. There stood my parents. My mom holding her purse like a shield. My dad's tie slightly crooked like he dressed in a rush. Neither of them spoke. I stepped aside. If you're here to yell, save it. They walked in. The silence stretched for a full minute before my mom finally cleared her throat. We need your help. 3 weeks ago. She threw my bags out and told me to go lead somewhere else. And now she stood in my tiny apartment as flicking over the modest IKEA furniture and half-eaten takeout on the counter. Asking for help. It felt surreal. My dad tried to explain what had happened. But I already knew Jordan had tried to fix things. Failed miserably. And then ghosted them. Probably too embarrassed to admit he didn't know how to fix something that wasn't in Excel. We can't even access our joint savings. My mom said quietly. We missed our mortgage payment. We're being charged late fees. That sounds awful. I replied. You must feel really stuck. She looked up, and for once the indignation was gone. Her voice trembled just slightly. I'm sorry, she said. He blinked. Not passive-aggressively. Not with caveats. Just, I'm sorry. My dad added. We didn't realize how much you were doing. We thought we were being generous. Letting you stay with us. But we didn't see it. That was the moment the dam broke. Not for them. For me. All the weight I've been carrying. All the silent resentment and hurt and shame it spilled out. Not in yelling. Not in tears. Just truth. I told them how it felt to be constantly compared to Jordan. To be treated like a failure. Even when I was trying so hard just to get by. How their approval always seemed tied to performance. Never to effort. And how being kicked out wasn't just humiliating. It made me realize how replaceable I was to them. My mom sat still. Absorbing every word like it's done. I didn't know. She whispered. I believe her. Sort of. I think she didn't want to know. There's a difference. They asked me to come back to help. To get things running again. Said they'd pay me for my time. Said things would be different. But I shook my head. I'll walk you through fixing everything. I'll write up instructions. But I'm not coming back. I have a job. I have a lease. I have peace. They look surprised. As if this little studio apartment was some kind of rebellion. But for me, it was sanctuary. I grabbed my laptop and sat them down. It took 2 hours to fix everything, resetting access, verifying ID, calling tech support. My mom was silent most of the time. Min dad kept muttering. This is ridiculous under his breath whenever he had to answer another security question. Once we were done, I closed the laptop and stood up. I'll send over that instruction. Doc, I said. But after that, I'm done. No more admin access. No more being the silent tech support. You're adults. You'll figure it out. They stood to my dad. Nodded almost respectfully. My mom looked like she wanted to say something more. But didn't. And as they walked out the door, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. I wish I could say that was the end. That they took my boundary seriously. That they learned their lesson and we all moved forward with newfound respect. But families, especially mine, don't change overnight. They don't just flip a switch and suddenly become self-aware or humble. What really happened next? That's where the real story begins. 2 weeks after they left my apartment, I started getting odd notifications. Not from my parents. No. They actually left me alone for a while. Which surprised me. It was from people around them. My Aunt Cheryl messaged me on Facebook. Hey. Sweetie, I heard you moved out on your own. That's so great. Diane said you've been distant lately. Just wanted to check in. Everything okay? Then my cousin Trevor sent me a screenshot of a group chat in which my mom was going off. I think Adam's being manipulated by his new job. He's different. Cold. Distant. I don't even recognize him anymore. All I did was ask for help. And he acted like I'd betrayed him. And then Jordan. It sent me a long, self-important email. Hey. Man. I know there's been tension. But I think you need to take some accountability. 2. Mom and Dad aren't perfect. But they're still our parents. Maybe instead of blaming them, you could just be more understanding. You had a rough patch. We all do. It doesn't mean the world is out to get you. Let's talk soon. Maybe. Coffee. I deleted it without replying. See what none of them understood. What still didn't click was that this wasn't about one fight or one insult or one bad day. It was years. Years of being the default helper. The one who was so smart with tech stuff but never invited to the adult table. Years of watching my accomplishments get minimized, while Jordan's every mediocre win was celebrated like he cured cancer. It was the birthday cards, with maybe next year will be better written in them. While Jordan got expensive watches and family dinners, it was death by 1,000 tiny cuts. But I didn't want revenge. Not the petty dramatic kind where you ruin someone's credit or hack into their social media. I wanted something far more permanent: distance, dignity, and the satisfaction of building a life without them at the center of it. That opportunity came sooner than expected. About a month after our last interaction, my company announced they were expanding their remote division and opening a satellite office in Toronto. They offered relocation bonuses to a handful of us, and I jumped on it. A fresh start. A new city. 0 family drop-ins. I signed the lease on a small one-bedroom downtown with a skyline view and a corner desk that overlooked the city. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. Paid for by a job I earned. Not a penny of help from the people who called me a leech. I sent one final email to my parents before I left. Not because I owed them anything, but because I wanted to be clear. Subject. Update. Hi. Mom and Dad. Just wanted to let you know I'll be relocating to Toronto for work. I won't be available to help with anything moving forward. Tech issues. Account access or otherwise. I've removed myself from everything and ensured you have full control. I hope this new chapter gives us all some peace. Take care, Adam. No response. Not even a thumbs up. And that might have stung before. But not anymore. Toronto was everything I hoped it would be. I joined a local coding meetup. Made friends quickly. And started volunteering at a nonprofit that helped older adults learn digital literacy. Every time I sat down with someone's grandmother to teach her how to set up 2-factor authentication, I thought, this is what patience looks like. This is what respect feels like. Meanwhile, back home, the cracks kept spreading. I found out from Lily, my unofficial family reporter, that my mom had started trying to get Jordan to take over some of the tasks I used to do. He said he was too busy. That didn't stop her from trying to kill them. Adam used to handle all this without complaining. She told him once. He snapped back. Then maybe you shouldn't have treated him like garbage. Apparently their golden boy had limits too. Then came the kicker. My dad made a mistake on their taxes. A big one. He accidentally input their mortgage interest in the wrong section of the form, and it triggered an audit. Not a scary federal investigation. Just enough of a red flag that they had to go back and refile and talk to the IRS about several years of discrepancies. They tried calling the tax software company But surprise. They no longer had access to the recovery email. It was now permanently deactivated because I had closed it after cutting ties. They had to hire an accountant. A real one, who charged $150 an hour and didn't respond to text at midnight. The real pain wasn't the money. Though, it was the control. They'd gotten used to having someone at their fingertips. Someone who would fix things immediately out of guilt or fear or some desperate need for approval. The person no longer existed. I didn't even hear about the audit from them. I found out from who else? Lily. Your mom's been in a bad mood for days. Dad messed up the taxes. She muttered something like, if the leech was still around, This wouldn't have happened. Lol. That's when it hit me. Even after everything. She still called me the leech. Not in front of me, of course. But behind closed doors in the safety of people she thought would agree with her. And that should have hurt. It should have reopened the wound. But it didn't. Because by then I had proof. Proof that her version of me wasn't real. I had a job I loved. Friends who respected me. A landlord who trusted me. A team that relied on me. A name on a lease. A bank account. A digital life that no one else controlled. And in the quiet of my apartment on a chilly Toronto evening, I sat down at my desk, opened my old Google Drive, and deleted the last shared folder I'd ever created for my parents. It was titled Banking for Mom and Dad. Do not delete. I deleted it with one click. Then I smiled. Because leech don't build lives. People do. And I finally remembered who I was.